The Korean billionaire CEO hated black women but accepted one blind date. She changed his life forever. Jae-hoon Kim, a name that commanded respect across the gleaming skyscrapers of Seoul. A tech prodigy who built Quantum Sphere, Korea's largest AI corporation. From nothing but raw ambition and ruthless determination. The kind of man whose footsteps echoed through boardrooms before he even entered them. A billionaire at 35 with the world at his feet and ice in his veins. But beneath that polished exterior, beneath the custom suits and calculated smiles, Jae-hoon Kim harbored a hatred so deeply ingrained that he never questioned it. Black women. He didn't hire them, didn't promote them, didn't acknowledge their applications, didn't even look them in the eye when they crossed his path at international conferences. It wasn't something he announced at quarterly meetings or included in company policy. It was simply understood. His executive team, all Korean men, all graduates of the same 3 universities, knew better than to bring him resumes with certain names or photos attached. His HR department had its unwritten instructions. His personal assistant had standing orders to decline meeting requests from certain organizations focused on diversity. "We maintain a certain corporate culture here," he'd say when pressed. "It's about compatibility, cohesion." Words that sounded reasonable but masked the ugliness underneath. The prejudice was a family inheritance, passed down like the vintage watch on his wrist. His grandfather, who lost everything in the war, blamed American soldiers for corrupting Korean society. His father, who rebuilt the family fortune, spoke of preserving Korean values whenever he saw interracial couples on television. Jae-hoon absorbed these lessons without questioning them, let them seep into his worldview until they became invisible to him, as essential and unnoticed as oxygen. Hello viewers. Welcome to Noir Desires. Before we continue with this powerful story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more content like this. The board was getting restless. For all his business genius, Jae-hoon remained unmarried at 35. In Korean corporate culture, this represented instability. A CEO without a family was seen as unpredictable, lacking the necessary anchor that kept men from making rash decisions. The whispers had started at the last shareholders' meeting. Questions about succession planning, about the company's future, about whether Jae-hoon Kim was truly committed to Quantum Sphere's long-term vision. His younger sister, Min-ji, took matters into her own hands one rainy Tuesday morning, arriving unannounced at his penthouse office with determination in her eyes. "I've arranged a dinner for you this Friday," she announced, ignoring his scowl as she placed a file on his immaculate desk. "Her name is Susan Williams. She's brilliant, a neuroscientist with 3 patents already. Her research on neural networks could revolutionize your artificial intelligence division." Not interested. Jae-hoon didn't even open the file. He recognized the name. Not Korean. He could guess the rest. She graduated top of her class at Stanford. Did her postdoctoral work at Seoul National University. Speaks fluent Korean. Min-ji continued as if he hadn't spoken. "She's currently leading a research team at the Kim Institute. The same institute that rejected your acquisition offer last year." That caught his attention. The Kim Institute had technology Jae-hoon wanted. Needed even to stay ahead of his competitors. But they'd rebuffed his generous offer, choosing independence over his billions. "I don't care if she's discovered the secret to eternal life. I'm not interested," he said, sliding the file back across his desk. Min-ji's expression hardened. "The board is meeting next month to discuss leadership stability. I've heard rumors that Lee Sung-ho is gathering support to suggest a co-CEO arrangement." The threat landed like a physical blow. Lee Sung-ho was his father's oldest friend, a major investor who had never fully trusted Jae-hoon to lead alone. A co-CEO would be a humiliation. Public vote of no confidence. One dinner, Jae-hoon. Friday at 8. Hyangto restaurant. Private room already booked. Min-ji turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and if you stand her up, I'll tell the board about that algorithm problem your team is hiding." The door closed before he could respond. Jae-hoon sat in seething silence, staring at the file he refused to open. His sister had outmaneuvered him, Using the one weakness he couldn't afford, the facial recognition algorithm his team had developed that worked perfectly on Asian faces but failed catastrophically on darker skin tones. A problem they'd been quietly trying to fix for months while still rolling out the technology to clients. If the board found out, one dinner, 2 hours of his life. Then he could go back to building his empire and forgetting that Susan Williams existed. Friday arrived with merciless speed. Jae-hoon deliberately arrived 15 minutes late to Hyangto, one of Seoul's most exclusive restaurants. Being late established dominance set the tone. Let her know that her time was less valuable than his. The hostess recognized him immediately, bowing deeply before leading him to the private dining room. Susan Williams was already seated, reading something on a tablet, completely unconcerned by his tardiness. The first surprise. Most people, especially women meeting him for the first time, fidgeted, checked their phones, betrayed their nervousness. She looked up when he entered, her expression neutral, assessing. The second surprise was harder to ignore. She was striking. Not in the manufactured way of the women who usually occupied these private dining rooms, the actresses and models and daughters of business associates, who laughed too loudly at his jokes and asked carefully rehearsed questions about his success. Susan wore her natural hair in an elegant updo, her makeup minimal, her dark brown skin glowing under the restaurant's soft lighting. Her dress was simple but clearly expensive, a deep blue that reminded him of the ocean at night. "Mr. Kim," she said in perfect Korean, rising slightly in acknowledgement but not bowing. "I was beginning to think you might not come." "Traffic," he lied, taking his seat across from her. The table between them felt both too wide and not wide enough. "Of course." Her tone made it clear she knew he was lying and didn't care enough to challenge it. "Shall we order first? I've heard the chef's seafood tasting menu is exceptional." Jae-hoon gestured for the waiter, ordering for both of them without consultation. The seafood menu? Yes, and a bottle of wine that cost more than most people's monthly rent. A power move he'd perfected over years of business dinners. "I prefer the sunchai tasting menu, actually," Susan said to the waiter before he could leave. "And just water for me, thank you." She smiled at Jae-hoon, the challenge in her eyes unmistakable. "I don't drink alcohol when discussing potential business opportunities. Keeps the mind sharp." The waiter looked uncertainly between them. Jae-hoon felt a flash of anger, then, surprisingly, a reluctant spark of respect. Few people dared contradict him so openly. "The sunchai menu for the lady," he conceded. "And I'll have the same. Water as well." When the waiter left, an uncomfortable silence settled between them. Jae-hoon studied her more carefully now. She held herself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew her worth precisely and didn't need his validation to confirm it. It was unsettling. "Your sister speaks very highly of you," Susan said finally, though she neglected to mention your punctuality issues. "My sister talks too much," Jae-hoon replied. "And this isn't a business meeting. It's a misguided attempt at matchmaking that we're both enduring as a favor to her." Susan laughed, the sound genuine and unexpected. "Is that what this is? I was told this was about exploring collaboration between Quantum Sphere and my research team at the Kim Institute." Jae-hoon felt heat rise in his chest. Min-ji had manipulated them both, it seemed. "My apologies for the confusion. My sister has been concerned about my personal life, or lack thereof." "I see." Susan's expression shifted to something more guarded. "Well, this is awkward. I don't generally appreciate being tricked into blind dates, Mr. Kim. Especially not with men who are known for their specific preferences in hiring and social circles." The words hit like ice water. She knew. Of course she knew. His prejudices weren't as invisible as he pretended. "I assure you, I was equally misled," he said stiffly. "Then we have something in common already." Susan picked up her water glass. "Since we're here, we might as well make the best of it. Tell me about the facial recognition issues your team is having with diverse skin tones." "That seems like something my lab could help with." Jae-hoon nearly choked on his water. "Excuse me? Your algorithm. It's failing on darker skin. Industry gossip travels fast, Mr. Kim. And unlike your HR department, Algorithms can't hide their biases behind corporate culture buzzwords. Her directness should have angered him. Instead, he found himself responding to the intellectual challenge in her eyes. The algorithm is functioning at 98.7% accuracy. For certain demographics, she countered. What's the rate for darker-skinned women? 60%? Lower. The actual number was 43%, but he wasn't about to admit that. We're making adjustments. With an all-Korean development team who have limited experience with global diversity, good luck with that approach. The first course arrived, momentarily pausing their verbal sparring. Jae-hoon used the interruption to regroup, to remind himself who he was. One of the most powerful men in Asian tech, not some graduate student to be lectured on diversity issues. My team is among the best in the world, he said after the server left. Your team is among the most homogeneous in the world, Susan corrected. And that's limiting your technology and your market reach. She took a bite of her food, closing her eyes briefly in appreciation. This is excellent, by the way. Good recommendation from your sister. You seem very comfortable criticizing a company you know very little about, Jae-hoon said, his tone cooler now. I've studied quantum sphere extensively. Your innovations in machine learning are impressive. Your applications in medical diagnostics could save millions of lives. She paused, meeting his eyes directly. But you have blind spots, Mr. Kim. Expensive ones. And you think you're the one to fix them? He couldn't keep the skepticism from his voice. My team already has. She pulled out her phone, opened an email, and slid it across the table. 3 months ago, we developed an algorithm that achieves 97.5% accuracy across all skin tones and facial structures. The Kim Institute wasn't interested in selling it to Quantum Sphere because of your company's reputation for, let's call it, cultural inflexibility. Jae-hoon read the technical specifications on her phone, his mind racing. If these results were legitimate, her team had solved a problem his best engineers had been struggling with for nearly a year. The market implications were enormous. The competitive advantage, undeniable. Why show me this now? He asked, sliding the phone back. Because I believe in the potential of your technology to do good in the world. And because artificial barriers, whether in algorithms or in corporate cultures, ultimately harm everyone. The conversation shifted then, becoming more technical. Jae-hoon found himself engaged despite his initial resistance, drawn into a discussion of neural networks and machine learning patterns that challenged his assumptions. Susan didn't just keep pace with his technical knowledge. She pushed it further, asking questions that made him reconsider approaches his team had taken for granted. 2 hours passed in what felt like minutes. The meal ended, the dishes cleared away, and Jae-hoon realized with surprise that he'd forgotten to check his phone even once. Something that never happened during business dinners, let alone personal ones. This has been unexpectedly productive, he admitted as they prepared to leave. High praise indeed, Susan said with a slight smile. Perhaps next time we meet, it can be an actual business discussion at my lab. I'd like to show you what my team has been developing. Next time. The words hung between them, a question disguised as a statement. I'd like that, Jae-hoon heard himself say. Tuesday afternoon? Tuesday works. 3 o'clock. I'll send my assistant the details. She stood, gathering her things. Thank you for dinner, Mr. Kim. Despite the awkward circumstances, it was illuminating. Jae-hoon watched her leave, feeling strangely off balance. He'd expected to endure an uncomfortable evening and escape as quickly as possible. Instead, he'd agreed to continue their conversation, to visit her lab, something he rarely did even with established business partners. His driver was waiting outside. Home, sir? He asked as Jae-hoon slid into the back seat. No, Jae-hoon said after a moment. Take me back to the office. I need to review some files. He spent the weekend researching Susan Williams. Her academic credentials were impeccable. 3 patents by 33. Published in the most prestigious journals in her field. Recruited by the Kim Institute specifically to lead their neural interface division. No scandals, no controversy. Nothing he could use to dismiss her or her work. He found himself lingering over photos from academic conferences, interviews she'd given to science publications. In every image, that same quiet confidence, the intelligence that had challenged him over dinner. He told himself his interest was purely professional. That her research could solve critical problems for his company. That Tuesday's meeting was about business, nothing more. Tuesday arrived with unexpected anticipation. Jae-hoon's assistant seemed startled when he rearranged his entire afternoon schedule, something he never did for anyone below the level of major international client. He arrived at the Kim Institute exactly on time, another departure from his usual habit of deliberate lateness. Susan met him in the lobby, professional in a simple blazer and trousers, her hair pulled back. She nodded in greeting, her expression carefully neutral. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Kim. My team is eager to show you our work." The lab was smaller than he expected, but impressively equipped. What really caught his attention, however, was the team itself. Diverse in every sense, gender, ethnicity, age. Researchers from at least 5 different countries, speaking a mix of Korean and English as they worked. So different from his own homogeneous development teams. Susan introduced him to everyone, each researcher explaining their contribution to the neural network project. Their enthusiasm was palpable, their respect for Susan obvious in how they deferred to her expertise, while clearly feeling comfortable challenging her ideas. "This is Dr. Park," Susan said, introducing an older Korean man. "He was my mentor at Seoul National University. Convinced me to stay in Korea after my postdoc. The best decision I ever made as department chair," Dr. Park said warmly. "Dr. Williams has revolutionized our approach to neural mapping." Jae-hoon felt a strange discomfort watching their easy rapport. It contradicted everything he'd assumed about how a team like this would function, the friction he'd expected, the inefficiency. Instead, he saw only collaboration and results. After the tour, Susan took him to a small conference room where she had prepared a detailed presentation of their facial recognition solution. The technical specifications were impressive, the potential applications even more so. "Your algorithm isn't just more accurate across demographics," Jae-hoon noted, studying the data. "It's also more efficient, requires less processing power. Diverse teams find diverse solutions," Susan said simply. "When everyone thinks differently, approaches problems from unique perspectives, innovation happens naturally. And you want to partner with Quantum Sphere? Despite our..." He paused, searching for a diplomatic phrase. "Despite your company's notorious lack of diversity and your personal reputation?" Susan finished for him. "Yes. Because your distribution platform could get this technology to hospitals and security systems worldwide. Because doing good at scale sometimes requires uncomfortable alliances." Her frankness was still jarring but less offensive now. Almost refreshing after years of people telling him only what they thought he wanted to hear. "What would this partnership look like?" he asked. "Joint development, shared patents, and an agreement that implementation would prioritize ethical applications, healthcare, missing persons, disaster response, before luxury security or surveillance systems." "That's not how we typically structure partnerships." "I'm not a typical partner, Mr. Kim." Their eyes met across the table, the challenge clear in hers. Jae-hoon felt something shift inside him, a door opening to a possibility he hadn't considered before. "I'll need to discuss this with my team," he said finally. "Of course. Take your time." She gathered her presentation materials. "This isn't a decision to rush." As he was leaving, Jae-hoon paused at the door. "Would you be open to continuing this discussion over dinner? Tomorrow, perhaps?" Susan studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "Is this a business dinner or another blind date?" "Business," he said quickly. Then, with more honesty than he'd intended. "But I wouldn't mind the company as well as the conversation." A small smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. "Tomorrow works. Send me the details." What followed was a series of meetings that blurred the line between professional and personal. Dinners that started with technical discussions and evolved into conversations about their backgrounds, their education, their perspectives on the world. Lunches where they debated the ethical implications of AI development. Coffee meetings where they sketched potential applications on napkins, their hands occasionally brushing as they reached for the same pen. Jae-hoon found himself looking forward to these encounters, rearranging his schedule to accommodate them. He told himself it was about the partnership, about the technology. But he knew there was more to it, a connection he hadn't expected and couldn't easily dismiss. A month into their professional relationship, Susan invited him to observe a practical application of their algorithm at Seoul National University Hospital. They were testing the facial recognition system in the pediatric oncology ward, using it to track minute changes in children's expressions to better assess pain levels when language barriers or developmental issues made self-reporting difficult. Jae-hoon watched as the system accurately read the discomfort in a young Nigerian child's face, alerting nurses to adjust pain medication before the child became distressed. He saw the relief in the parents' eyes when they realized their daughter's needs were being met without her having to vocalize her pain. "This is what technology should do," Susan said quietly, standing beside him. "Bridge gaps, solve real problems, make life better for everyone, not just those who look like the developers." Later that evening, as they walked through the hospital garden, Jae-hoon found himself telling Susan about his childhood, about his grandfather's bitterness, his father's rigid worldview, about growing up in a household where certain prejudices were simply accepted as truth. "Understanding where it comes from doesn't excuse it," Susan said. Her voice wasn't accusatory, just matter of fact. "I know," he admitted. "I never questioned it, never had to. The world I built for myself never challenged me to think differently. Until now." The conversation marked a turning point. Jae-hoon began looking at his company, at himself with new eyes. He reviewed hiring patterns, promotion records, the homogeneity of his leadership team. The blindness of it struck him with growing discomfort. Then came the email from his chief technology officer. A potential merger with Vision Tech, a major competitor whose founder, Park Sung-min, was known for aggressive cost-cutting and exploitative labor practices, particularly in their overseas operations. The board was enthusiastic. The financial projections were impressive. The competitive advantage, undeniable. Jae-hoon forwarded the email to Susan without comment. Her response came an hour later. Their facial analysis software has been used by authoritarian governments to track and arrest political dissidents. Is this really who Quantum Sphere wants to become? The question haunted him. 3 years ago, he wouldn't have hesitated. Business was business. Profit was the only metric that mattered. Now, he found himself researching Vision Tech's applications, discovering patterns of abuse he couldn't ignore. When he expressed concerns at the preliminary board meeting, the reaction was immediate and negative. "This is business, not charity," Park Sung-min said dismissively. "If we don't develop these applications, our competitors will. At least our shareholders benefit." "Besides," added Lee Sung-ho, the board member who had threatened to push for a co-CEO, "these ethical concerns seem very new for you, Jae-hoon. One might wonder about outside influences affecting your judgment." The implication was clear. His relationship with Susan, still professional but increasingly personal, had not gone unnoticed. The old guard saw it as a weakness, a corruption of his business instincts. This story is about to take an incredible turn. Make sure you've subscribed to Noir Desires and turned on notifications so you never miss our uploads. Are you Team Jae-hoon or Team Board of Directors? Let us know in the comments. The merger vote was scheduled for the following month. Jae-hoon threw himself into research, building a case against the partnership based on long-term brand damage and regulatory risks. But behind closed doors, he knew most of the board had already decided. They saw the ethical concerns as sentimental, irrelevant to the bottom line. 2 weeks before the vote, Vision Tech was implicated in a major scandal. Their facial recognition software had misidentified 3 black men as suspects in a terrorism case, leading to their wrongful arrest and detention for 9 days. The men were suing, and investigations revealed that Vision Tech had known about the racial bias in their algorithm, but deployed the software anyway, considering the error rate acceptable for their business model. Jae-hoon called an emergency board meeting. He arrived with a comprehensive presentation, not just on the Vision Tech scandal, but on the broader implications for Quantum Sphere. "Gentlemen," he began, looking around the table at the faces of men who had known him since childhood, who had watched him build this company. Today we face a choice that will define who we are for decades to come. His presentation was meticulous. The financial implications of the Vision Tech scandal. The regulatory backlash already building in Europe and America. The market shift toward ethical AI, and the premium consumers were beginning to pay for technology they could trust. But beyond the business case, he continued, there is a moral one. The technology we develop shapes the world. It can reinforce existing prejudices or help overcome them. It can exploit vulnerable populations or protect them. Lee Sung-ho interrupted, his voice cold. This sounds like something your new consultant might say. Perhaps Dr. Williams should be giving this presentation instead. Jae-hoon met his gaze steadily. Dr. Williams helped me see something I was blind to. But this presentation, this position, is mine. As is this company. A company you seem willing to weaken for the sake of abstract principles. Park Sung-min countered. The merger with Vision Tech would increase our market value by at least 30%. Their government contracts alone. Their government contracts are precisely the problem. Jae-hoon cut in. I won't build a company that profits from oppression. That's not the legacy I want. The meeting devolved into heated argument. Old accusations surfaced about Jae-hoon's leadership, about his changing priorities, about Susan's influence. When it was clear he couldn't sway them, Jae-hoon made a decision that would change everything. Gentlemen, the vote will proceed next week as scheduled. But I want to be clear about one thing. If Quantum Sphere chooses to merge with Vision Tech, I will step down as CEO. The room fell silent. His threat carried weight. Jae-hoon wasn't just the CEO. He remained the largest single shareholder. His departure would send shock waves through the market, potentially tanking the very stock value the merger was meant to enhance. You would destroy what you built over this? Lee Sung-ho asked incredulously. I would refuse to destroy it by making it something I can no longer believe in, Jae-hoon replied. He left the boardroom without waiting for a response. That evening he called Susan. I may have just ended my career, he told her, his voice strangely calm. Tell me, she said simply. He explained the ultimatum, the likely fallout, the uncertain future ahead. Are you sure about this? She asked when he finished. This company is your life's work. I'm sure that I can't lead Quantum Sphere down the path they want to take. And I'm sure that I wouldn't have seen that 6 months ago. He paused. Before I met you. Jae-hoon. I'm not blaming you, he clarified quickly. I'm thanking you for making me see beyond my own narrow perspective, for challenging me to be better. The silence stretched between them, full of unspoken emotions. Come over, she said finally, not to discuss business. Just come over. That night changed everything. Sitting in Susan's small apartment, surrounded by her books and research papers and the simple beauty of a life dedicated to making a difference, Jae-hoon felt a clarity he'd never experienced in his minimalist penthouse or sleek office. I don't know who I am without Quantum Sphere, he admitted. I built my entire identity around that company. Maybe that's the problem, Susan suggested gently. You're not just a CEO. You're a person. With values and choices and the capacity to grow. When he kissed her, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Like a door opening to a room he hadn't known existed. The week before the board vote was chaos. News of the potential merger had leaked, along with rumors of Jae-hoon's ultimatum. Quantum Sphere's stock fluctuated wildly. Business publications ran speculative pieces about his leadership, his relationship with Susan, his apparent ethical awakening. Most were skeptical, assuming it was either a negotiating tactic or a midlife crisis. The morning of the vote, Jae-hoon did something unprecedented. He called a company-wide meeting, inviting all employees, from senior executives to maintenance staff. Over 2,000 people gathered in the main auditorium and connected conference rooms, uncertainty evident on their faces. I founded Quantum Sphere 10 years ago with a simple mission: to develop artificial intelligence that could solve real-world problems. Along the way, we've created remarkable technology. We've changed industries. We've made a lot of money. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. But we've also created systems that reflect and sometimes amplify the biases of their creators, myself included. A murmur ran through the crowd. This was not the Jae-hoon Kim they knew, the ruthless perfectionist who demanded results above all else. Today, our board will vote on a merger that would increase our market share and our profitability. It would also align us with a company whose technology has been used to harm innocent people, to suppress dissent, to reinforce systems of discrimination. The murmur grew louder. Employees exchanged glances, unsure where this was leading. I have informed the board that if this merger proceeds, I will resign as CEO. Not as a negotiating tactic, but because I cannot in good conscience lead a company that prioritizes profit over humanity. The auditorium erupted in shocked whispers. Executives shifted uncomfortably. Lower-level employees looked both confused and intrigued. Whatever happens today, Quantum Sphere will change. If I remain as CEO, we will embark on a fundamental transformation, diversifying our teams, reviewing our applications for bias, prioritizing ethical development alongside profit. If I leave, he shrugged, a gesture of unexpected vulnerability from a man known for his certainty. Then each of you will need to decide what kind of company you want to work for. The board vote was scheduled for 2 p.m. By 1:30, employees had organized an impromptu demonstration outside the boardroom, hundreds of them, standing silently, watching the board members arrive. Not protesting exactly, just present, bearing witness. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere was tense. Lee Sung-ho spoke first. Your theatrics this morning were inappropriate and potentially damaging to shareholder value, he said coldly. This emotional appeal to employees who don't understand the business implications. Those employees are the business, Jae-hoon interrupted. Their talent, their creativity, their work is what builds our products. They deserve to know what kind of company they're building. The vote proceeded. 7 board members voted against the merger. 3 for it, including Lee Sung-ho and Park Sung-min. Jae-hoon remained CEO, but the victory was just the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead, transforming a company culture built on his own biases and blind spots, creating something better, more inclusive, more ethical than what he had originally envisioned. The next morning, he called Susan. We need to talk about that partnership, he said, not just for the facial recognition algorithm. For a complete ethical review of all our systems. A top-to-bottom transformation. Are you sure your board will support that? She asked. They'll support it or I'll replace them, he said simply. This isn't a minor course correction. It's a complete redefinition of who we are and what we stand for. The business media was merciless. Articles questioned his judgment, his stability, his relationship with the American researcher who's redirecting Korea's most innovative tech company. Stock analysts downgraded Quantum Sphere, predicting that its new ethical focus would hamper growth and limit government contracts. Jae-hoon's former allies distanced themselves. Business associates canceled meetings. His invitation to the Presidential Economic Council, something he'd once coveted, was quietly rescinded. Through it all, Susan remained steady, supportive, but never allowing him to retreat into self-pity or self-righteousness. This was never going to be easy, she reminded him one evening, as they reviewed yet another negative press piece. You're challenging not just your company, but an entire industry's assumptions about success and profit. I never thought it would be this difficult, he admitted. Or this lonely. She took his hand. You're not alone. Not anymore. Their relationship deepened as they navigated both personal and professional challenges. Jae-hoon found himself sharing parts of himself he'd kept hidden even from family. His doubts, his fears, his growing awareness of how limited his perspective had been. Susan shared, too, the exhaustion of constantly proving herself in spaces that weren't designed for her, the microaggressions she'd endured throughout her career, the determination that had carried her forward despite them. 6 months into Quantum Sphere's transformation, disaster struck. An internal memo was leaked to the press, a detailed assessment of bias in the company's existing products, including evidence that they had known about accuracy disparities across demographics for years before Jae-hoon's change of heart. The document was genuine but incomplete, missing the sections outlining the corrective actions already underway. The stock plummeted. Class action lawsuits were filed. Government regulators announced investigations. And in the midst of the chaos, Lee Sung-ho made his move, a hostile takeover attempt leveraging the crisis to argue that Jae-hoon's leadership had become a liability. "This is what you risked everything to prevent," Susan said as they reviewed the takeover documents. "Lee Sung-ho is partnering with Vision Tech to acquire controlling interest in Quantum Sphere. He's been planning this since I opposed the merger," Jae-hoon realized. The leak wasn't accidental. It was strategic. For the first time since his transformation began, Jae-hoon felt the old temptation to fight dirty, to use the same underhanded tactics his father had employed in similar situations. He had information on Lee Sung-ho that could destroy the man's reputation. He had connections who could apply pressure where it would hurt most. "What are you thinking?" Susan asked, watching his expression darken. "That I know how to stop this. But not the way I want to be now." She touched his face gently. "Then find another way, a better way." The solution came from an unexpected source, the employees themselves. When word of the hostile takeover spread, a group of senior engineers approached Jae-hoon with a proposal: complete transparency. "Release everything," their spokesperson suggested. "The original assessments, the corrective measures, the internal debates, all of it. Show the world that we identified these problems and are actively fixing them, not hiding from them." "We'll be crucified," Jae-hoon objected. "The lawsuits will multiply." "Maybe at first," the engineer agreed. "But we'll be the first major AI company to voluntarily expose our flaws and commit to fixing them. That counts for something." It was risky, potentially catastrophic. But it aligned with the values Jae-hoon now espoused. Transparency. Accountability. The courage to acknowledge mistakes and learn from them. The document release was comprehensive. Every flawed algorithm. Every biased result. Every internal email discussing the problems. But also every corrective measure. Every revised model. Every improvement made since Jae-hoon's epiphany. The initial reaction was brutal. More lawsuits. More investigations. More damning headlines. But something unexpected happened as well. Smaller tech companies reached out, sharing their own struggles with algorithmic bias. Academic researchers offered collaboration. Even some competitors acknowledged similar issues in their systems. A movement began to form, not around Jae-hoon specifically, but around the principle that technology companies had a responsibility to acknowledge and address the biases in their systems. That profit couldn't be the only metric that mattered. 3 weeks after the document release, as Lee Sung-ho's takeover bid gained momentum, Jae-hoon received an email from Zhang Wei, the CEO of China's largest AI corporation and Quantum Sphere's biggest competitor. "Your transparency has forced uncomfortable conversations in our boardroom," Zhang wrote. "We're finding similar issues in our systems. I would like to discuss potential collaboration on industry-wide standards for ethical AI development." Similar messages arrived from tech leaders across Asia, Europe, and America. Not all were supportive, many criticized Jae-hoon's methods or questioned his motives, but all acknowledged that he had changed the conversation about AI ethics in a way that couldn't be ignored. The morning of the shareholder vote on Lee Sung-ho's takeover bid, Jae-hoon arrived at Quantum Sphere headquarters to find hundreds of people gathered outside. Employees. Yes, but also students, researchers, even representatives from human rights organizations. They carried signs reading "Ethics Matter" and "AI for All," not just some. Inside, the atmosphere was tense but not hopeless. In the weeks since the document release, Quantum Sphere's stock had begun to stabilize. Several major institutional investors had publicly questioned whether Lee Sung-ho's vision, a return to profit above all thinking, really represented the future of AI development. Jae-hoon's presentation to the shareholders was unlike any he'd given before. No slick graphics, no aggressive projections, just honest assessment of where the company had been, where it was now, and where it could go. "We have a choice today," he concluded. "We can return to the comfortable blindness of the past, developing technology that works perfectly for some and fails catastrophically for others. Or we can lead the industry toward something better, AI that serves humanity in all its diversity." The second path is harder. It requires more work, more humility, more willingness to acknowledge our mistakes. But it is the only path that leads to technology worthy of the future we want to build. When the votes were counted, Lee Sung-ho's takeover bid had failed narrowly, but decisively. The shareholders had chosen Jae-hoon's vision, not because it promised higher short-term returns, but because they believed it represented the future of the industry. In the aftermath, Quantum Sphere emerged transformed not just in its leadership and development practices, but in its fundamental mission. The partnership with Susan's team expanded into a new division focused exclusively on ethical AI applications, with priority given to healthcare, education, and environmental protection. The company's workforce diversified slowly at first, then more rapidly as its reputation for inclusive practices spread. New perspectives brought new ideas, new approaches, new solutions to problems that had once seemed intractable. And through it all, Jae-hoon's relationship with Susan deepened. They navigated cultural differences, family expectations, public scrutiny, not always perfectly, but with growing understanding and commitment. 2 years after their first reluctant dinner, Jae-hoon proposed, not with grand gestures or expensive displays, but with simple honesty during a quiet evening at her apartment. "You changed everything," he told her. "How I see the world, how I see myself, what I believe is possible." "You changed yourself," she corrected gently. "I just showed you a different perspective." Their wedding was small by Korean standards but vibrant with the diversity of their combined worlds. Susan's family from America, Jae-hoon's relatives still. Adjusting to this unexpected turn in the family legacy, colleagues and friends from across the global tech community. Jae-hoon's mother, who had initially resisted the relationship, embraced Susan with tears in her eyes. "You've made him better," she whispered. "I didn't think anyone could." 5 years later, Quantum Sphere had become the industry leader in ethical AI development. Its facial recognition technology, now free from demographic bias, was transforming healthcare and disaster response worldwide. Its commitment to transparency had set new standards that competitors were forced to follow. And Jae-hoon himself had transformed from a man defined by prejudice and profit to a leader who understood that true innovation required diversity of thought, of experience, of perspective. On the 5th anniversary of the failed takeover attempt, Jae-hoon stood on stage at the Global Technology Ethics Conference, Susan beside him, their 3-year-old daughter watching from the front row with her grandmother. "5 years ago, I was forced to confront my own biases in the algorithms my company created and in the man I had become," he told the audience. "That confrontation was painful. It cost me relationships, reputation, and nearly my company. But it gave me something far more valuable. The chance to build technology that serves humanity in all its complexity and diversity." He looked at his daughter, her beautiful brown skin, her curious eyes taking in everything. A child who would grow up in a world where technology recognized her face as easily as it recognized his. Where her ideas would be valued not despite her identity but because of the unique perspective it gave her. The easy path would have been to continue as I was, successful by conventional metrics, respected in traditional circles, blind to the harm I was causing. I'm grateful every day that a blind date I didn't want to attend led me to a woman who helped me see beyond my limitations, who challenged me to be better than I knew how to be. Susan squeezed his hand, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "The work of creating ethical technology is never finished," Jae-hoon concluded. "But it begins with the willingness to see every person as fully human, deserving of technology that serves their needs, recognizes their face, honors their dignity. That willingness changes everything. Our companies, our technologies, ourselves." As the audience rose in applause, Jae-hoon looked at his family, at the future he had nearly denied himself through prejudice and fear. A future richer, more complex, more beautiful than anything he could have imagined when he reluctantly agreed to that first blind date. He had lost an empire of bias and gained a kingdom of possibility, and in that exchange had found himself transformed. Thank you for watching until the end of this emotional journey. Did you enjoy the story? Let us know your feelings in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe to Noir Desires as we bring you another powerful story very soon. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload.